So today I'm really excited to share the story of Caroline Hannan. And we find the kernels of her story within a collection that we have at the Heinz History Center's Detry Library and Archives. It's known as the Femme Sole Trader and Separate Earners records. And these are actually local county government records. So they derive from Allegheny County and they were entrusted to us. And they contain the petitions of women who, beginning in the 19th century, came forward and wanted to attain this status of femme sole traders or separate earners. So in order to understand Caroline's story, it's helpful just to provide a little bit of background as far as the femme sole trader and separate earner status. So firstly, the status of femme sole trader was actually historically initially extended to the women of sailors and really help them exercise some autonomy financially, as well as in regards to property holdings, and then also in regards to their custody of their children in instances where their husbands were out to sea. Now, beginning in the 1850s, this status is actually extended to women who are outside of those that are the spouses of sailors, but it's something that a woman, in order to attain, had to present herself to the local county court of common pleas and file a petition. And so we know, of course, during this time period in the 1800s, that women did not have the same property rights, of course, as men. And so in order to attain this status and to get a certain measure of autonomy over property, over financial holdings as well, and then in addition, for some custody of their children, to have custody of their children, they essentially had to file a petition saying that their husbands had placed them in such a dire situation and were not effectively supporting them, so they deserve to attain this status. Now, of course, a woman's word solely was not trusted during this time, and so two men had to testify to the veracity of her claims in order to attain this status, and then the courts would make a decision. So if we bring Caroline then back to the forefront, knowing that background information about who she is, we learn a little bit more about what her life was like during a particularly harrowing period of time. So Caroline comes before the Court of Common Pleas in Allegheny County in 1865, shortly after the end of the Civil War. So what she says is that over a year ago, her husband, Frederick Manns, had passed away and had left her as a widow with 4 children, the oldest of whom was 11 years old. Now, before her husband Frederick passed away, the two of them had owned and operated a cigar and tobacco shop. And at the point of his death, Caroline really takes over management of the cigar and tobacco shop. And in the intervening time, actually changes the name of the business that's on the masthead of the exterior of the shop to C. Manns. So for her first name, Caroline C. Manns. And this shop is in downtown Pittsburgh on Smithfield Street. Now we learn too, based on this petition, that a couple months later she remarries to a Jeremiah Hannan. And unfortunately, it becomes pretty clear based on her petition that pretty soon she finds Jeremiah to be a supremely unhelpful partner. So not only does he not help at all in the management and operation of the cigar and tobacco shop, he actually really actively drives out customers because of the nature of how he carries himself. So I really can't beat the bush, he's a drunk. And in addition to being a drunk, he is actively as well taking he takes from the profits of the shop in such a way that it starts to compromise Caroline's ability to support her 4 children and to maintain this business. And so it's been a little over a year since she's been remarried to Jeremiah, and she's had it. So she goes before the court at this point and testifies to what she's encountering. Now, if we recall, Caroline needs 2 witnesses to come forth and to testify to the truth of what she's saying. And so as a result, Caroline's father, as well as one of her employees, comes before the court and not only attests to the truthfulness of what she's stating, they also divulge some additional really interesting details. really one of the more interesting that I find comes from one of her employees. And he in effect says that Caroline, of course, even though her surname changed to Hannan once she married Jeremiah, she very wisely chose not to change the name under which she operated this business. Unfortunately, it seems that Jeremiah's reputation was so well known and he was associated with such ill repute that this employee says that if she were to have changed her name and changed the name of the business, that it would cause its ruin, because no one would be able to, no one would take her credit, or no one would hold credit for her if she were to change her name, because of the nature of how Jeremiah conducted himself around town and his reputation as a drunk. And so you might imagine that, of course, as is fair, Jeremiah should have an opportunity to come and defend himself and take any issue with any of the claims that Caroline has put forth. And he does have that opportunity, and he does present himself to the court, and he does not take any issue with any of the statements that Caroline and her father and one of her employees put forth. And as a result, Caroline is extended femme sole trader status. So we learn all of these incredible insights into Caroline's life, this woman in downtown Pittsburgh as a business owner, because of course, this petition that is documented within this collection that we have at the History Center. And in poking around, I tried to find a little bit more information about Caroline, and she emerges in the newspaper records later on in life. And in fact, it's her obituary in 1908. And this is a copy of the obituary. And I love the masthead that just says, "Wealthy businesswoman passes away." So when you read this article, you learn that she lives to be quite old. So she lives to be 78 before she passes away. And that we learn too more that she's of German-American heritage. And what's so interesting in this obituary, as you read, is that she, as she's getting older, she's still the business owner of the cigar and tobacco shop in downtown Pittsburgh. And over time, her kids really try to convince her to move to, a calmer part of town. And she summarily refuses and consistently lives atop this business for the remainder of her life. And what I think is so remarkable about looking at this obituary is that if this is the only source that is easily accessible relating that documents Caroline's life, it would be a curious anecdote in an obituary, but because we have this earlier source that testifies to how diligently she advocated for a certain measure of autonomy over her business, as well as over her children and her finances, it totally informs her dedication to this business and her refusal to leave it, even as she aged and got older and approached her death. So I think that broadly, even though this is one story of one woman that appears in this collection of femme sole trader and separate earner records, I think it powerfully demonstrates the glimpses that you can attain into the experiences of everyday women who had encountered some real strife and difficulty within their personal life that compelled them to present themselves before the court. Now, I don't know this 100% for certain, but I would be hard-pressed to think of another grouping of sources that could provide this measure of personal insight into the experiences of women in Allegheny County during this time period from the mid-1850s onward. And so it's an incredible collection relating to the history of women in Western Pennsylvania, and one that we're really proud to have at the History Center's Detry Library and Archives. And I'm really happy to report too that this collection is open for research whenever we're able to reopen safely to researchers again following this period in time. Additionally too, I'm excited to say that my colleague Carly has written a piece on the collection of femme sole trader and separate earner records, and that will appear in the next issue of the History Center's Western Pennsylvania History magazine. So there are just so many incredible future research inquiries I think that this collection could address And I'm so honored to be able to share Caroline's story. I think she's remarkably inspiring as a swashbuckling woman business owner in Civil War era Pittsburgh.